I think the hardest coaching situations I've dealt with is when you've got a teacher who they're lovely and they're kind, but they are being fried by their grade eights. It's like,
welcome back to Progressively Incorrect. My name is Dr. Zach Rochelle, and I have the great pleasure of welcoming Tom Sherrington and Oliver Caviglioli onto the podcast for the season 3 premiere of this show. Tom and Oliver are two UK-based educators who have collaborated on numerous projects that I think have great value to teachers. These include Rosenshine's Principles in Action and the new USA edition of the popular WalkThru books, which will be in focus during this episode. I should probably apologize in advance for all the nerding out I'm going to do during this episode, but I just couldn't help myself. These two gents have truly been instrumental in shaping not only my teaching, but my instructional coaching practice, and I felt truly honored that they took the time to come share their ideas on the pod. Thank you to everyone who has been pestering me online to get started on this new season over the past few months, and please keep sharing this podcast around to your friends and colleagues so we can spread the word that, well, explicit instruction isn't all spooky and authoritarian, and that successful kids are happy kids. So, without further ado, please enjoy my chat with Tom Sherrington and Oliver Caviglioli. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Progressively Incorrect. I have a really amazing treat for all of you. I feel like I'm talking to Larry Bird and Magic Johnson a little bit right now of the education world. How are you both doing? Tom and Oliver, where are you right now?
well, right now we're in the Renaissance Hotel at SeaWorld in Orlando, and I can literally see all the roller coaster rides outside of my window. It's fantastic to be here in the States, and we're enjoying ourselves.
Yep, and I've been sticking in a few hours work in between presentations. We were doing a secret new book.
Yeah. Ooh, secret, and so you cannot tell, but it's you know, a lot of people tell me right off the bat, like, it's really hard to publish with anyone. Like, all these projects people do go down the toilet really quick when you're working with someone else. How did you meet, and how do you get along, and how have you done, how have you been able to produce so much, great stuff for teachers?
The Rosenberg connection.
Rosenshine. Well, we started off as our first collaboration was a poster. I wrote a blog where I just sort of cut up Oliver's poster about Rosenshine's principles, and I just put it into a different order. And then he made a version of that. And then I wrote this book. I should say it's the shortest book ever written about Rosenshine's principles, and Oliver did the cover and illustrations for it. So that was so we basically have this sort of thing where we do different parts of the process. And then for the WalkThru's books, Oliver had the idea to make the book, and then we carved up a kind of process of writing where exchanging, so toing and froing. So because we do different parts of it, it's a genuine collaboration. So it's been great. We kind of neither of us could do it without the other, essentially. So we're mutually dependent.
Yeah. Well said.
I wonder too, so you mentioned the WalkThru books. I think it's important for especially people in the United States who may have not heard of the WalkThru books. I'm flashing a copy right here on screen. It's essentially 5-step guides to developing great teaching. It also has a lot of practical value for instructional coaches. So I kind of want to go through this book. It's been invaluable, and I've kind of gone public about some things in instructional coaching I just don't find as useful. This is something I find useful. Yeah, maybe describe to listeners the why behind this book. What were you trying to do when Oliver, when you had that idea? What did you want to achieve when you decided to start these books up?
Well, there was a number of problems, and I don't think they were necessarily people suffered from them, but they didn't realize they suffered from them. One was, I noticed something when I was leading courses myself. Just when I was doing some work on graphic organizers, I'd get some of the older teachers say something like, oh, wow, I used to do that. So we've got this phenomenon in education where not only do we forget what worked generally, we even forget what we did worked. So we have this continual professional amnesia, and it seems such a shame. So obviously, we're always after the latest thing. But most teachers, for most of the times, have used a set of core teaching techniques that work. So we basically just brought them alive and made them accessible. The other thing that I had was, if you were designing a chair, you would really need to know how much money you got available, how much money is the customer going to buy, and how long they're going to sit on there for. So you look at the end experience, and I just saw teachers are just really busy. So they're really busy, and yet they're told they ought to read. And yet they're really busy, yet they have to read. And it just seemed, those who had time to read criticized the teachers who didn't read, and yet they just gave them longer reading lists. So there are other areas, other professions where they've managed to make access not only easier, but also more attractive. And to me, it just seemed an easy thing to do. Well, it was difficult, it took a long time to do it, but I was really clear what the task was. Good capture, curate it so it makes sense. There's all the series of techniques. Teacher would understand straight away why they were together. It's not esoteric. Even the words conjure up a sense of, oh, that'll be practical. And then when you get to the walkthroughs themselves, we found that a common format, because one of the things you don't want to do is to learn how to read one page and then the next page is different. And the next page is different. So a common format which would accommodate all the different techniques, but it had enough consistency to make it really easy and pleasurable. And then to be really well designed, So I noticed that a lot of the material for teachers either looked deadly dull, or especially for primary teachers of the early years, it's almost as if the teachers themselves were 7 years old. So it was all happy clappy, primary colours. So something which would represent really respectful tone to a professional.
Yeah, I mean, that's when Oliver said we used to meet a lot. Well, we still do, but now we work together, it's more deliberate. But we used to meet each other all these research ed conferences or festivals, and I remember Oliver just approached me and saying, all these people, there's so much good stuff happening, there's so much good discussion, but it all just gets lost, and if you're not at the event, how does anyone know about it? And there would seem to be an appetite for these education posters and graphics. So we just said, why don't we make a book? So he came around to my house one day, and we just sat and I said, well, what will we put in it? And we took about 20 minutes to just say, well, we'd have to have this.
Power of sticky notes, eh?
And it was like the content wrote itself, because the ideas that teachers have are kind of fairly well known. And then we just went, well, that's 5 steps seemed like a good number. And then so the book has then, to be honest with you, it's been a lot more popular than we even expected, because it's just helping people access information quickly. So you don't have to read it at all. You just read a page for one technique, or flick through a few of them, or help scope out stuff over time. So you can read it a lot at a time, or just one at a time. So you can access it in multiple ways, and the thing is, you can keep going back to it. So what we find is teachers read it once, but then they refer to it, because you can just, we'll talk about this more maybe, but the main function it serves once you originally read it is as a prompt for discussing how to use a technique with some sort of guidance to the conversation you'd have, rather than teachers constantly thinking, let's try and invent teaching again every time we meet, and that's the thing. I
think it's made the techniques permanent. They were always transient, depending on someone forgets, a famous person drops it, doesn't mention it, they just go out of fashion. But it's all been invented. I remember Tom on his courses sometimes gets someone at the back saying, there's nothing new here. Tom says, great.
Yeah, exactly. That's nothing new. And it amazes me. So let's say last week I did a course for about 100 people came, and it was about Rosenshine's principles, which is to me a bit like for me like playing one of my kind of classic albums or something, because I've been talking about that for years, and none of the people there had, well, not saying none, that's not true, but there's five people put their hand up when I said, how many of you already previously read this, showing them the free PDF of Rosenshine's principles. A few people gingerly and so even though you have it and it's there and it's free and you've come on this course, you haven't actually opened the pages and studied it. And because teachers are so busy, it's unbelievable really how little time is privileged for engagement with these ideas. So
maybe too, they found out from experience those hours they've spent reading have never really resulted in anything practical in the classroom.
So just having this opportunity to say, okay, so let's go through it then. What does it say? What do you do with it? What does it look like to do it? Anyway, so that we just found this sort of niche, I guess, for communicating well-established ideas in an accessible format has just I don't know, just been very popular. People have come to it and found it helpful.
And I wonder, I can imagine a criticism of this because I've heard of it for other books that I really like Teach for a Champion, for example. I remember I read Teach Like a Champion at school, and even the principal while reading it was like, if we narrow down teaching to these smaller micro moves, aren't we really destroying sort of the feel of it? Aren't we ruining the art, I guess, by making it into a technique of way too segmented sets of smaller skills, I guess? I mean, how does the book address that, or do you even see that criticism really being valid?
We certainly encounter it now, but we sort of anticipated that from the start, because our view is that it's like art versus science kind of thing is a classic kind of dichotomy. But art is how things look on the surface, but they're all based on technique. So even when you look at any art, a ballet dancer, a jazz musician, a free-form jazz musician, really busking it and being creative, underpinning that is secure technique, so they can confidently diverge from a standard. Same with artists, they have technique. Technique is the bedrock of every creative person, and so and it looks like it's invisible because it becomes so, but it's not a total mystery. So what we've done is say, when you watch a teacher who's on top of their game, it's amazing how many techniques they use, sometimes woven in together. But if we're trying to get everyone to be able to operate at that level, it's really helpful to say, and Doug Lemov did this well with, let's look at some specifics. And then what you do is you explicitly, and we think in the way we present it, encourage people to weave them together again. You have to codify things so that you understand what you're doing, but then of course you weave it back into a more organic thing. But if you're too afraid to describe the elements of an organic system, people watching it or trying to engage with it go, oh God, that teacher's just magic, that's what a great teacher. And they're doing specific things. I can't be that person, but I can see kind of specific things they're doing and try to emulate that in my own style. Yeah, so I think that's important I understand the critique, but it's not reductive. In fact, I see it the opposite. I see it as a kind of a platform, and it's a bit like we use lots of analogies here, but it's a bit like this, in chemistry, there's only so many elements, and all of life is made of them, and
yeah.
But the elements can be small in number, and yet what you do with them can be incredibly expressive and varied. And I don't worry about that. In fact, the opposite is true. I feel that I find that having the techniques to refer to allows you to be way more precise and in the short term, but then it allows you to get much further down the road in a coaching conversation about quality, about depth, about the substance. And there's a lot of process in coaching, which sometimes you think, well, okay, and when do we get to the beat? When do we get to the bit? Let's get there quicker, because we can look at the technique and just say, okay, how about this? Is this something you're doing? Is this something that might be useful? And we can talk about it because it's already there to look at, rather than, I wonder what might be a good thing here. And they're like, we haven't got time for that. We've got to just get on with it. And it just it punches through. And that's the truth is, I mean, I say this, like, it sounds a bit salesy, but it's just a simple fact that I do this work myself. I go into schools. Since I've had my own resources to look at, I just think it's so helpful, because I can, instead of like just me talking waffle about techniques, I can just say, I can open it up and go, let's look at this. And I just find my own conversations are immediately deeper straight away.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so we talked about multiple uses of the book. I mean, you could buy this as a teacher and basically sign a self-coach, right? Like self-teach and use this as a reference. Maybe your teaching is just, you're struggling with something, or you go and you look at the table of contents and you kind of draw your finger down and you go, okay, this might be the section, like behavior, for example. Let me just check out the behavior section. But you can also use this, as I do, which is as an instructional coach. You're at an instructional coaching seminar, a conference. I mean, what have you seen in terms of the development of instructional coaching worldwide? Since it's become so popularized, what are you seeing in terms of some of the developments?
Well, the word coaching is fraught with some problem, because the origins of personal life coaching gives you its impetus, its value, its ethics, and its way of approaching with empowerment. And the early days, that's what it was in education. There was no content. In fact, they used to follow Sir John Whitmore's GROW model, in which, in one of his books, he proudly says on one occasion he didn't have any specialist, I think, skiing coaches, so he had to use his tennis coaches, and he found they were more successful. And so that kind of logic grew in education, where in England, certainly, the actual thing that you were coaching about didn't seem as important as the relationship and the communication, which was bonkers, really bonkers. So instructional coaching was immediate remedy to that. However, it itself is always going to be limited if, even though the focus is on techniques, if you're only going to talk about them and it can rely on your memory, then that's going to be limited too. And I mean, Jim Knight has this quote that we use often, that it's really almost impossible to consider that you could become an effective instructional coach without a playbook, without a permanent, curated, readily accessible reference point, which isn't a secret only to the coach. It's public, it's shared, it's common. So you have a common knowledge, common language, and then we just take off from that platform. So much easier. But just recently, Tom and I were saying it's hard to consider that a profession can be so without the establishment of common language.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. What I've noticed is that, so for the longest time, instructional coaching in England seemed to be kind of something people researched but didn't do. And we'd heard about it, and Jim Knight was famous, but for kind of stuff which is outside of our system rather than in it, and really in an exciting way. In recent years, a few sort of people have been trying to scale it up, and scaling up is important because there are thousands of teachers, and it's no good having a little niche thing which a few people manage to do in a study. You need to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teachers, thousands of teachers improving. So people have been trying to scale up, and there are numerous organizations now in England who are pushing that agenda and saying, well, how do we use coaching concepts, instructional coaching concepts, to get teachers to be more into it? And I feel like that's been good. So there's been a kind of marriage of Jim Knight's kind of humanistic teacher first approach with sort of somewhat technocratic, okay, but there's content and there's systems which we have to then use to train coaches or to get coaching going. And I think that's quite a good sort of melting pot now
Yeah.
of ideas. I don't think everyone's totally nailed it, but the truth is, I mean, this is an interesting thing between a kind of system difference. Today, in the conference right now, there's 1,500 people here, the majority of whom are full-time instructional coaches. That's their job. We don't have that job in England. Like, no one has that job in England. A teacher who is a coach will probably get like a 20% decrease or something like that in their timetable, and that 20% then allows them to do some coaching of some people. And so you don't have this sort of totally specialist coaching role. So we do have to constantly, when we do work of implementation of developing programs in schools, we have this whole decision-making decision-making framework. And one of the whole things is, how do you link professional development to observation, to training, and iterative feedback conversations? And a lot of schools have to do a lot of thinking to create the time.
Given their resources. I remember I caught Tom saying, I use it as a quote, the advice is, don't design coaching systems with resources you don't have. I mean, it sounds crazy when you say it like that.
Yeah.
But that's actually what you were finding.
Yeah. But even today, like, in the US, people were sitting around a table with people, and one person saying, the thing is, in her district, for example, was that schools, they have like one district level coach is assigned to the school of 70 teachers. That's it. That coach is the coach of 70 people, and that's can't be done. Like, you can't coach 70 people. Another guy I sat next to today said he had a caseload of about 15 people, and that was okay. And and it's like it's sort of like, but even that's the logistics of that. So I think we're in this nice place now where we're talking about how to set it up to exist as a system in a school, and talk about the nature of the conversation we have, and talk about the content of that conversation in terms of teaching. And it's all three of those things need to come together. But it's a kind of a bit clunky here and there, but I feel like that's a good place to be to sort of move it forward.
Yeah, it's, and it's funny you say that about the full-time. So I am a full-time instructional coach here, and I have 40 teachers at my building. I'm in building. I don't move or rove buildings. And what keeps coming up again and again is, I feel like there's a clash between what we want to do here in terms of this type of school and a lot of the more typical advice in instructional coaching, which tends to, I relate it to kind of more of a constructivist approach, where I see the coach really trying to facilitate a dialogue, conversation with the teacher. However, like, we don't have time to lose, I guess, here. We have a school that essentially just a few years ago was just at the point of no return. It seemed like we needed a full scale intervention. And I suppose maybe if Ofsted was here, we would have gotten, what's the lowest rating? Yeah, we got worse than that probably. But a new team came in, and we focused on behavior. We look at structures. We started doing do nows. We have narration in the hallways. We have kind of more rewards and punishments are sort of embedded without. And all of that came about, I guess, through a combination of leadership and instructional coaching kind of working together. And it was so directive and so top down. And yet we're all happy and successful in that scenario. When we talk online, I always feel like I'm saying something and then you're saying a different point, and I don't know where they meet. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I do. I mean, I think this is why I feel people who deal with instructional coaching have got to be careful not to promote a kind of purist endeavor, which doesn't deal with that reality. And this is one of the things I've learned from a lot of work with schools, is that collective action, for me, is undervalued in the instructional coaching world. It's just not remote. It's not given enough.
Well, it's not acknowledged,
airtime.
is it?
Well, well, it is a little bit, because today, I mean, I've learned that people in here, for example, talking about PLCs, or professional learning communities. So teachers might have a coach and a professional learning community. So there's not like, but it's sometimes they don't connect. But this idea of the collective, and I think that the motivation aspect of coaching, and goal setting aspect of coaching, can be more strongly driven when you feel part of a collective than it can be generated by person to person to person to person with one-to-one coaching. So if we all sign up to a thing, like our school will be way better if we all go out in the corridor and narrate the lineups and the pre-lesson behaviors. That benefits us all. Let's do that thing. It feels like a directive, but we're kind of we're professionals and we support each other. The collective thing, we see it happening. We're all doing it. It's not just me. It's not because I'm a poor teacher.
I was going to say, so it's collective, not corrective.
Yeah, collective. Yeah, exactly. And we see it working. Great. So we reinforce that. Now, the coaching side of that is sort of, to get to the same stage would take a lot longer. I mean, much more inefficient. So I feel like you have to have these waves, and you have these waves of action where you can lift everyone up, going boom. And I think of a school. There's a colleague that we know in England who's a deputy principal of an elementary school. So quite a big one. It's like 5 classes, quite big, like 500 students. It's quite a big primary school. She coached her whole team. We should call it coaching, like squad coaching. Okay, everybody, these are the techniques. Think, pair, share, say it again better. These are the names of the techniques, to get her students to be talking to each other with some sort of depth. Every class in the whole school. So she coaches them on how to do it, feeds back every 2 weeks. And it's like, you call it like mass coaching in a sense. It lifts the school up to this point massively. They get out of the hole they were in a little bit with inspection to the next level up. And now they're in a position to finesse and go into smaller groups and eventually down to the smaller, because then they can talk about individual things. But that wave of collective action has lifted them out of a situation, and that's how I see it working. So there's a phasing there. They'd never have seen that change in that school if they had just relied on the coaching. It can't work in isolation of the bigger school system.
And Oliver, you sent me something. We were talking one time, and I can't remember his name, but you sent me it was maybe video, or maybe it was just text description of a famous coach. This coach was essentially like almost correcting every little aspect of
that
this.
was Fernando Flores. Yeah, that's quite. That doesn't work in schools. That's extraordinary. He's extraordinary. He was £1 million a coaching session or something, and he's working with top executives. That was something else that I just pointed out of interest. That would never ever work in schools.
And I think that's what some people maybe have interpreted this idea of directive, or maybe top down, where you're coming into someone's class, you don't really have an idea of the context. You don't really care, I suppose. And you rush in there and you're like, mini whiteboards. We got to have mini whiteboards. And all of a sudden, this teacher's like frazzled, and maybe they adopt it, maybe they don't. But then they're just doing it to please you, or maybe to get you off their back, right?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, this is important. In fact, today I was really encouraged by this, because I went to a session today, and there was this really good discussion about this. What do you call it? Like a continuum between facilitative coaching and directive coaching. And there seemed to be a consensus. Lots of voices were piping up saying, look, it's not like that teacher needs a facilitative approach, that teacher needs a directive approach. There seems to be a consensus that we kind of move along this continuum all the time. Like even within one conversation, you might say, honestly, watching that lesson, I think you really need to do that, because you might not notice, but I noticed this, and you kind of can like full on telling. And then with the same teacher, you're saying, but tell me about that over there. Like, I don't, what do you think's happening here? And what do you think might be the solution? So you go all full on facilitative about a whole other aspect. all in one conversation. So it's not even like it's not even like there's a kind of a neat person-to-person approach. You're sort of, and then of course if you coach someone over time, you work out, oh, okay, they listen to that bit, but they don't listen to that bit, because even if you feel you ought to tell, you feel like I need to say this, and that's your instinct, it doesn't necessarily work because the teacher can't do the thing you're suggesting, or didn't. It has to come more from them, even though you want to tell them. So you think, okay, even though I've had that urge, guess what? It didn't work. So I'm going to have to sort of find another way in. And that's what coaching's like. You're finding the right dynamic to get the teacher to see the thing and change the thing that needs to be changed. So I feel like we have to understand that. And calling it top down, I sometimes feels like it's too, like almost like a pejorative. But I do think there's a sense of, teachers aren't just going to work to sort of pursue their own little personal groove. They're part of a school where the community is the thing, and the children need to have a good experience. Like you're saying, there's an urgency, and sometimes the leader's role is to say, look, we got to do this. This is you can't see the whole. We can see the whole because that's our role. And you have a massive, important role to play, but you don't just get to go and do your own thing in your classroom. We're part of a community of people, and we all need to support each other. So I'll give you, for instance, if you go from a culture of hands up and calling out and lessons where 5 children dominate every lesson because they can call out anytime they like, and you've got kids sitting passively behind, and we want to introduce accountability like cold calling, think, pair, share, everyone talking, everyone thinking. If everyone's doing that in the school, it's way easier for everyone than if you're having to fight the hands up, calling out one teacher at a time. So collective action there might seem in the short run top down. Long term, thank God for that. Like, thank you for making me work in a school where I don't have to fight the hands up anymore. And you know what I mean? So I feel like we have to allow ourselves to see teachers as part of an organic, like a community of practice, not just solo operators.
And I mean, you both have like these mental models of what good teaching is. Like, I if I could like summarize Oliver's in my mind, I know you came from like a special ed background, right? And so when I read like dual coding for with teachers, I think of like all of the work that you've gone to think of like how to break this down into a way that everyone can access it, right? Do you see any sense in like maybe withholding that information just enough for the teacher to sort of come up with it?
I think, first of all, which is why we put the why section at the beginning, your advice, however good, will end up being like a tip, which means it may work or it may not. If you can't see the point of it, and most techniques wouldn't work really effectively first time, which means the teacher would execute it with less commitment to it working, and would then gather excuse to go and tell you that it doesn't work. So I think you need to analyze the main problem children are having and the need to do something about it, and what possible solution could we have. And in that discussion, you say, well, actually, I've seen that sort of thing happen before, and this is what I would suggest would work. And it's a shortcut, and I'd recommend you take the shortcut. But if you want to explore something else, that's fine. But my guess is you'll end up here. Then,
I like the shortcut. I like the shortcut word. I should say that more. Like, so do you want the shortcut? Or
I feel like what I've learned though is that I mean, this is why I say this in all the training I do of teachers and coaches, is that when you're in a lesson, I have my laptop with me, I'm looking at my walkthroughs, or I've got a mental picture of them. I'm writing notes kind of to myself for the conversation I'm going to have with the teacher. But I'm well aware of the fact that kind of the best possible outcome really is I don't need my notes, because even if the instinct is there to tell them, you have to, and I think this is the thing this is a thing I'm kind of going on about a lot at the moment, is you're hardly ever there with the teacher when they're working. Like you have you have a little tangential contact with them, a nice discussion here. Even if you have a really brilliant coaching relationship, you see them here, they're there, you observe them a few times, and most of the time they're just on their own doing their thing. And those are the times you need to influence more. You've got to be thinking, like, how do I help you think through your teaching more generally? So even if I'm talking about a specific technique, it's really just a vehicle for getting the teacher to think more broadly about, how do I know my lessons are going well? How do I know which students are doing well? What can I do about that? What's the situation that I'm in? What are my options? And so you have to involve them in the conversation. You have to say, what do you think might be a problem then with that? Or did you think that was going okay? I saw this. What did you see? Is there something you can do about that? What might be, and you have to ask it in those ways, because the teacher needs to be given the opportunity to go, yeah, maybe I should do that, and think it out. If you just tell them that, it's like being given the answer to a math problem. You don't have a chance to compute it. You go, oh yeah, I know, I get that, but I wasn't able to get there myself. And I think that's the same with teaching. So it's like teachers telling you the answers to the math problems. It's not that you have to work it out, but of course you're there to guide. You guide it quite strongly, in fact. But like you just said, like you throw out some choices. The teacher has to make the choice always, even if you're being very directive. And this is what I think is really brilliant about coaching. I think it's one of the most useful and powerful things about it in our country, is that it's helping break down the culture of what we used to have as just formal lesson observations, say 3 times a year, with a sort of 3-page. I was at a school about 3 weeks ago where they told me it took them 45 minutes to fill out the lesson evaluation. And it was so complicated, they have to do it out after school. So they have to, like, 45 minutes to fill out a form to describe a lesson that, is immediately in the past. It's absolutely ludicrous that even is still a thing that people would do. And coaching is making you realize you don't do that. You see people for small little observations multiple times with nudging conversations in between. It's a way better way of dealing with teachers. And that's changing big time in the UK. I think we're shifted a long way, say in 10 years, I would say, which is great.
Yeah, I don't know if that shift, we'll see if that shift occurs here, but yeah, we definitely got the after school 45-minute, and they're not, they're not that connected, or they're not, I don't know. My dream would be that they somehow connect, like that the evaluation could lead to coaching, or coaching could funnel into the evaluation. If we're not going to get rid of evaluations, can we make them better? But I want to talk about this zoom in, zoom out idea that I've heard from Oliver a few times. And I know it's actually coming up in a conference that we're both attending or both presenting at. That it made me think of elaboration theory, that Charles Regeluth. It made me think of the camera lens. I wanted to hear what that is. What is this zoom in, zoom out sort of metaphor for coaching?
Well, in instructional coaching, there's a lot of talk and interest in getting granular. And it's really powerful to do that. But I just wanted to balance it out a bit, because if you only get granular, it reminded me, because I've been around so long, reminded me of the times of behaviorism when you just teach individual bits. So you could teach all the individual bits of driving a car, but it's a whole other matter being able to do it all at the same time in proper sequence, in fluent fashion. So this idea came to me when I don't go into schools hardly at all now. As Tom comes back, he tells me stories. And the one you told me was that often the head teachers want to get as much value for money as they can. So Tom's had all the day training and he's getting his computer together, and the head saying, I've got this supply teacher. What do you call it in America? Substitute teacher. Or I've got this old teacher, this new teacher, this poor teacher. Can you just give me some advice? Which actually follows on from what you were saying, but you're saying it to the head. And with regard classroom management, or once they've managed that, the actual teaching, when Tom was describing it, he was invariably giving out 2 or 3 walkthroughs. And I was thinking about it a lot, and it seemed to be really effective. And sometimes we get to truth when we do things really quickly, because all that stored up knowledge comes out in very concentrated format. And I was thinking about it. I had another memory of my daughter, who was coming home from dancing lessons, and she told me this lovely word about, Daddy, come and look at my amalgamations. And amalgamations are the steps she'd learnt and how she put them together into different sequences. And then the obvious occurred to me that in sports, you may learn individual skills with a coach, but what a coach also has to do and realize is that on the court, you have to put them together. You have to put them together to have fluent performance. And, so I started drawing pictures of, the boxer's jab, the hook and whatever. And in tennis, the serve, volleys, smash. And so it seemed that in teaching, we do need to go granular when we do need to go granular. And then so if you think of a continuum, you've got a step, and then you have a technique. But what Tom opened up my eyes to was techniques are put together. And when they're put together, I think that's when you get the true meaning of the word play, as in a playbook. So a walkthrough is a playbook, and it has all the techniques. But what we found resonated immediately with teachers, because I think they recognized this represents what teaching is in a classroom. You do things together in a particular sequence. You do technique A because it's inherently useful, and it sets up a more effective and quicker technique B. And so we call them clusters, though I think they are what's meant by play in sports. You put things together. And so in that sense, when you look at teaching, you zoom in ultimately to a step of a technique, and then you zoom out to a play. And actually, if you want to zoom out still further, you have a general strategy, and then an organization or department may have established those. That's our culture. That's what we do. That would then become a policy. So along that continuum, I think it's useful in the coaching conversation, in the coaching relationship, for at any one time, for the coach and the teacher to realize where along the continuum are we going to talk about.
Wow, that's excellent. I'm just trying to think like how I can put that into practice, right? Like, I have in my mind what I think good teaching is. I have resources like this WalkThru's book, right? And I can give them individual granular steps, but it's how to prompt them to make those connections, how to create. Yeah.
On our website, we have a problem solution page. And it came from practicing teachers. And they found when they were working with the clusters, they created it, not because it was interesting or intellectually challenging, but because it was their solution to a problem or situation they found in their classroom. So gradually you find these little, it sounds too scientific to call it, little formulas. We find if you see this sort of situation with your students, then we found generally these sets, this play, this combination and sequence of techniques works really well.
It's like kind of like subroutines or something, that you have like, if that happens, then, and it's like, this is the thing where in teaching, you have to build up a kind of memory or knowledge of things that you do routinely. One of the things I find is so interesting in teacher training is how working with teachers sort of break their habits or make new habits. So one of the disciplines, for example, let's say you want to have a dialogic culture where when I ask you a question, you're going to give me an answer, and then I'm going to follow up with another question to you. So I'm going to say, so Zach, tell me, what do you think? Why does the sun rise in the east? And you give me your first go, and I go, Like, if my commitment is I'm going to follow up, I need to listen to you because I need to ask you another question. So I have to really listen to what you say. I can't just go, yeah, Zach's talking now. And Oliver, why do you think? Oh, yeah. And sometimes teachers do that. Whatever the kid's saying, they're not really listening because they don't have to. But if you make it so that you're saying, right, so let's listen. What are you saying? Okay. Oh, it's interesting. So why? But what about this though? And it deepens the conversation. It brings it. So that's as an example of the general thing is I'm trying to get students to give more extended verbal answers. I want everyone to be thinking, and I also need to hear more from the students. So my technique then becomes listen and respond, and I'm getting right down into that. And then how many students do I listen and respond to before I think, because I go, I've asked Zach, I've asked Oliver, I've asked Daisy, I've asked Michelle, I've asked Alison. Like, now we're dragging on now we're thinking, what about the rest of the kids? So I think in the broader frame of teaching a whole class, we've got this sort of subtle interplay of what I do with each student, how many students I ask. So you kind of have to zoom right out again and think, okay, what's my wider goal is I need to actually just sample the students, get sufficient responses to tell me how I'm doing, and for them to hear a range of answers, but then the lesson will shift gear and so on. So you have to zoom in and out all the time. And I feel that to me is a really interesting way of thinking of it. Like, I need to think about what I'm trying to achieve broadly at the same time as thinking the precision of a step really makes me do something really thoroughly, and you just get stronger responses and you get deeper interactions and lessons. Yeah, so I mean, Oliver's right. He's it's like working with Oliver's fantastic because like I often do these webinars, and then this Oliver is like sort of hanging back, and then he'll just like a mirror back to me, kind of what was being said and how it, and it's just like, oh, that's amazing. It's like then you kind of analyze it and create a way of codifying that so that more people can engage with that. And we found that it works for ourselves, so it definitely works for teachers as well, talking to each other. But
Yeah.
Go on. Sorry, Nick.
And when I hear all this, it's just all going through my mind the kind of different types of teachers that I've worked with, where some they appreciate, I think, that talking about, especially when I prompt the zooming out, they start to see like how everything kind of refers to each other. Everything is for a purpose. It's not random. Teaching isn't just like a random set of things or this magical thing that you look at from a distance. But of course, other people are just much more practical, maybe is a nice way, or just they're just sort of day to day. They're just trying to teach their class and just kind of get through it. And it's a lot harder for me to embed it's a lot harder for me to get them to zoom out.
Yeah, I think that's hard. I feel like I think there are sometimes where, and sometimes teachers' habits are so based around their kind of the limit of where they feel confident. So you need to be quite precise about a change they might make. But it's an awareness. I think this awareness of however you teach. I think we all have kind of personality, don't we, that we bring in. You have to be aware of where your particular way of doing things has potential downfalls. So like, here's a classic kind of teacher that I got a lot of respect for these people because I feel like they have a place, which is they're the storytellers. The storytellers are not necessarily great listeners or interactive. They have a charm, they have a kind of charisma. And I've sat in lots of lessons where the teacher is just like just holding court and the kids are hanging off their word. And it kind of feels good. And they're enjoying it and the kids are laughing and the story seems to be coherent. And you think, oh, this is making sense. I can listen to this person all day. But then you realize when you talk to someone, you say, so what do you think's happening? They've kind of lost it about like 10 minutes ago. And you think, so when you're a raconteur, you need to be thinking, I wonder if everyone's following me so far, and check in a couple of times, and you got to think, just check in, like just stop for a moment. Don't lose that part about yourself, but just remember that if you're doing that, you're not allowing everyone to tell you how it's going for them. So stop and check. And that could be something which is a bit of a, and you can make a case for that, can't you? Like, it'd be annoying to find that having gone on for so long that half the kids didn't know. And it's that type of thing. And other things are things like teachers who geek out with individuals. I mean, that's a very common teacher thing. Oh, yeah. Oh, awesome. Hey, Michael, that's so cool. Michael. Jennifer, great. Abdi, Michael, Jennifer, and Abdi having this awesome lesson. Everyone else is just like watching it, like watching a tennis match, and they're not involved. And again, that teacher needs to say, like, how can you use that you're doing so well, like interactivity with the few, and just loop everyone into that, so you have to sort of look at what they're doing well and say, that's great. But the pitfall of that is that the other kids are not in it. So I think that's the kind of the way to do it, is you have to sort of think, what is it they may not, you don't want to lose the thing they're good at, because that's their, that's them. They're almost never going to change that, even if you wanted them to, because that's who they are. You have to harness that. And I find that so interesting when you're watching a teacher thinking, oh, what is it that's their default mode, which is kind of unbreakable, which I kind of therefore need to make a strength from.
I mean, and I've heard people even say, other coaches in our kind of coaching collaborative meetings and things, saying like, I can't coach personality. Like, I've heard that a few times, right? Like, I don't know about this person. This person comes with a lot of baggage, or this person's just has a bad attitude, maybe, or they're a little loopy. Their dialogue is just going back and forth. It's hard to slow them down and understand what they're saying. And I mean, I kind of feel that, because it's sometimes it feels really tough to work with that. In other parts of me think I've got to find an in somewhere,
Yeah. I think the hardest coaching situations I've dealt with is when you've got a teacher who, they're lovely and they're kind, but they are being fried by their grade 8s. It's like, and they're being disrespected horribly, but they don't know how to get out of their kind of slightly meek lack of assertiveness, and they don't know how to just say, come on, and get the students to focus. And you feel like you have to really break it down into actions they can take, like gesture and voice and standing in a different position. And it feels so mechanical to deconstruct a persona in that way. But sometimes you just think, you look frightened. Like, stop looking frightened. You got to, like, go over to the table with the kids who are talking and just say, how's it going? Like, make a point of engaging with them. You've got to find what's the solution. And I don't think that's easy. I think some teachers that is the hardest stuff, because it feels like a personality thing, but you've got to stop it feeling like that and make it more of an actions based thing. Otherwise the teachers, never going to get through it.
I'm already thinking of a new book you both could do, because the illustrations would be amazing. It might not go very well, but it would be great for me, which would be like a teacher archetypes book, where you've got the teacher who has no confidence and here's the things you would do. And then you got the storyteller who just like goes on, and there's the things you do. I feel like you've observed so many lessons now that you've developed these.
I think we could invent a card game.
For spot yourself. I mean, but you have to be aware that you're sort of describing yourself. I mean, I was just a terrible self-centered show-off type teacher. And the feedback I had from my first teacher observation was, okay, Tom, that was okay, but who was the one having all the fun? He was like, because it wasn't us, It's like, okay, all right, you need to involve the students more, might be a good move. But yeah, I mean, this makes it interesting that you need to. But the tension we talked about, isn't it? Like, schools need to allow teachers to express themselves. Otherwise, they don't stay. I mean, some of the stuff I was hearing today about schools where like 50% of the teachers are uncertified and pulling relief teachers from everywhere just to cover the classes and stuff. So you've got to make teaching feel a job where you are able to kind of thrive and express yourself, and within that improve your practice. And if the collective move like you've described in your school helps you feel that you can thrive, that's good, right? I mean, that's got to be therefore the right thing to do, rather than everyone fighting their own corner.
Well, I am so glad we got to talk today. I'm looking forward to, this. I know you have more projects that you're sort of keeping under wraps, but I'm looking forward to them. Are there anything you would like to share in terms of sort of next moves for both of you?
Yeah, go on, break the news. Yeah, we're working on another walkthroughs book. We're coming to the end of it. It's a 180-degree shift. It's actually from the student's point of view. So it's a learning walkthroughs.
It's written to students. It's like we're addressing it all to students, saying when you're in class, when you're at home, how to do this, how to do that, how learning works for you. So it's like for the students, which has been great fun to do.
Wow. And that's something I cannot believe I didn't say this interview, but no time but now to say it, was the idea of this third point of communication where you put this walkthrough next to you, and it basically saves face or takes off all of that kind of intimidating kind of, when you're looking straight in the eye with a teacher, you can look at the third point and look at this. I wonder if this is like even beyond that. Now the teacher can take the learning walks, the learning walkthroughs, and be like, so this is what's going on in a student. It's not me. It's an issue out there that I need to address.
This is one of the best things that Oliver explained to me. Like, third point 3-point communication. I never had it before, and now I do this work bizarrely with our own book. But I lay it in front of somebody, and I immediately feel the benefit. It's like, let's talk about the technique together, side by side, and it's immediately kind of compresses the whole.
I think people have realised that's the area to go. For a decade, I've heard the phrase, tell the teachers it's about the teaching and not the teacher. So conceptually it's right. It's just you can't execute it. It didn't work. It was this way just seems to be so effective.
Well, that is exciting.
When I used to introduce it in courses, I used to advise the teachers not to believe me, but to go home and practice it with their children at home when there was a difficult situation.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that. Well, I'm looking forward to it. And Tom, I just want to thank you for your website. It's like one of those things that brings me so much fulfillment every time you post a blog. Oliver, thank you for letting me kind of steal a lot of images off your website. I don't know. I try to cite it correctly, but it's so great to talk to you both. I hope you get a foothold in the United States, because I think there's a lot of need here. Thanks for coming on the show.
Great to speak to you.
Thanks for inviting us.
All right, take care of you both.